Yeah, if anybody is joining me right now live, first off, thank you for doing so. And above all, I hope everybody is happy and healthy where they are. This video came about because of some comments and questions from people here on Facebook, on the What's Your Ghost Story Facebook page. And I thought it'd be fun to do a live answer session. And I like to get to be more regular when it comes to putting out videos regularly while we're all in quarantine and lockdown. And I know that's kind of the big thing right now is how much longer will we be in quarantine? And that number is changing very much state to state. And I do have to say, I'll soapbox for just a little bit, I promise, as I'm just killing time. Take politics out of everything. I think that's always step number one. Take politics out of everything. What is just the best thing for us to do right now? And who cares about what governor or what politician said what about we should open up, we shouldn't open up. Let's focus on the health of all of our people. And the thing to do right now, the question that we see a lot is, we are a free state. We should be able to do whatever we want. And the reason we are in this situation we're in right now is because we absolutely are a very free state. We are not a free country. We're not somebody that's used to being told what to do. And the protests that I'm seeing lately have been just terrible. Then this is, I think, the thing that's really important to look at. This is how the death rate happened during the 1918 pandemic. You see that first bump, over here. Imagine if that's where we are now, and now all of these protests happens, a bunch of states open early, and then that's what the second wave looks like. That's what we all want to avoid. So let's do everything we can to encourage each other to safely stay home. And by all means, I'm not coming from some ivory tower. I am taking financial hits as well. My regular day job is affected. The fact that there's been several different conferences and speeches that I usually give by now that sometimes they pay decently. Those are just gone. So yeah, we're all hurting, but let's try to only hurt financially and not hurt in the health section as well. I don't want to point this in a positive light because it's not positive, but I think if you're on this channel, you probably, in addition to being interested in ghost stories, you appreciate history. And this is an amazing time that we're living in right now. The fact that we are going to be able to say that we lived through such an incredible part of American history, let's not let that be lost on us. So we have to, as dark and sad as it often is, I think it's a good idea. At least I am taking a moment to appreciate that my life has changed in a heartbeat, just like everybody else. And in time, it's going to go back to normal, and we'll always look back at this time to think about what a weird occurrence this was that we were fortunately able to live through. I think there's something of value to that. And it's also interesting because the next video I've been planning to put out, and it's going to be coming out pretty soon, is an insanely haunted site. Unbelievable place in southwestern Illinois that is so intensely haunted. And I cannot believe so many different TV shows haven't set focused episodes of their show at this location, because it's such a unique place, so much of a deep history, a dark history, but it's all about the cholera epidemic. And that place, for a long time, I thought, oh gosh, I don't know, do I want to tell a ghost story? This is a place I visited last year, so well before any of current events happened. And I was looking forward to telling the story of this place. And then when all of this happened, I thought, well, maybe it's not right to tell that kind of a story now. But you know what? Now, as people are getting cabin fever, and I get the cabin fever, maybe it's a perfect time to talk about how intense and how serious cholera was as well. This is something that humanity has lived through many times in the past, and we're going to live through them in the future, sadly. But we freaking rule as human beings, and we can make this through. Okay, so, and I do want to just do another, if anybody has, if they're podcast listeners and you listen to literally every podcast on the planet, which it feels like you could have done by now, being locked down for a month or more. I have a podcast called the Fantastic Story Society. My partner, Max Tim, we actually release every 2 weeks, except we really ramp it up in October, releasing weekly, and then we kind of coast for a while after that. And we are up and running again. We had an episode come out a couple weeks ago from where we interviewed the Galena Tour Company hosts, Ted and Robin, these incredible people that talk about this in just a wonderful town of Galena, Illinois, and all of their, well, and many of their ghost stories. It's a superbly haunted place that I can't wait to visit once again once travel opens up. But the podcast is the Fantastic Story Society, and we talk about the art of telling ghost stories, about telling dark stories. We have an episode coming up that's been recorded, not yet released, about Rockford, Illinois as well, a place that I didn't actually know all that much about, even though I grew up in Illinois, in northern Illinois at that. But then in addition to that, we have an episode coming out soon with DJ McHale, who is a dear friend of mine and somebody that really guided me in the world of production a lot. He created actually the show right over here, his Flight 29 Down. That was the show that he created and wrote every episode of. Oh, but another show he created and wrote every episode of is Are You Afraid of the Dark? That really awesome Nickelodeon show where it's about sitting around a campfire and telling ghost stories. So we recorded that just the other day, and we'll be releasing that. That'll be the next episode out. So if you want to look for this little logo, this little ghost bubble dude, talk bubble, speech bubble ghost, that is what you're looking for. The Fantastic Story Society on Facebook and anywhere you can find podcasts. And if you look in your podcast catcher, whatever podcast app, and you look for it and you don't find it, let me know, because that means I missed one and I need to register it there too. So please let me know. Keep me in the loop. I want to make sure this gets out there. Because I'm very proud of what we put out. Jeff Belanger was our first guest. Mike Huberty was our second guest. Amelia Cotter, who's doing some pretty cool storytelling sessions right now every Tuesday on her Facebook page. And Jeff actually has been doing a lot of live interviews, kind of Zoom style on Facebook as well. So and also a shout out to the See You on the Other Side podcast and Sunspot. They've been doing a lot of live entertainment, as well as Dale Kazmarek. From the Ghost Research Society. He's been going live very frequently, going over evidence and whatnot. So a lot of people doing a lot of cool things to try to keep us all entertained. So hats off to all of them for the good work that they've been doing. So now at the topic at hand, the comment that really kicked this one off was about spirit attachments. Let me see here. So the comment specifically was from someone named Rebel Mac. So first off, hello, Rebel. I don't think we've met. Ghosts that follow people even when they move and such is how it was written. And so that's the concept of spirit attachments. Really the idea that you go to a haunted location and as I think it was The Conjuring, their tagline was, it's not the house that's haunted, it's the person. It's the person was just me over explaining it. And yeah, it's definitely possible to go to a haunted location. And of course, you can go to a haunted location that you don't know is haunted. And for whatever reason, there's a consciousness there, an entity there that jives with you. Think, hey, this person's cool. I'm going to stalk their ass home. And suddenly you've got an attachment. And it's one thing to think that, okay, well, suddenly now there's activity going on around me, but an attachment can actually be even more negative than that. So I wanted to tell a story about a friend of mine, and this is a longer story. It's not one I've ever written up in a book or anything like that. It just comes from a personal experience, and fortunately for me as the tourist, I was able to witness a lot of this myself firsthand. And this happened when I was super new into the world of the paranormal. This was 1999. It was late 1999, around Christmas time. So at this point in my life, I did the documentary already with my friends Jeff Lord, Jason Jacobs. They were my co-hosts. And in that documentary, we went into a handful, I think it was 8 or 9 haunted locations all around Chicago and told the ghost stories on location. And we didn't really ghost hunt because ghost hunting wasn't much of a thing yet. I don't even know if that term had originated, but it certainly wasn't out like it is now. This was 4 or 5 years before TAPS, Ghost Hunters, the TV show, started. So this was definitely not a common thing to be doing. And so my idea was just to grab a camera, go on location, tell the stories on location. If we could interview witnesses, we would do that. But really, it was just kind of all about seeing these places for ourselves and telling the story. And and we shot that over the summer, premiered that fall. And then I'm 18 years old. So this is the summer after high school. And now everybody kind of disperses and goes off to their different various colleges. And there's a lot of different people involved in this story. So I'm going to use everybody's real names, but I'll just use their first names, just so we can keep people straight. So we got, around Christmas time, everybody came back home, and I'm from Northern Illinois, like I mentioned. And we were at one of my friend's house, whose mom is really into the paranormal as well. She was kind of our spiritual guide, where we would say, "Hey, this happened. What the hell was that?" And she was somebody that could speak from some place of knowledge, more than we had, at least, and say, "Oh, well, this is something that's good, or something benign, or this, like, don't go back there." It was very nice to have a consultant of sorts while we were doing that documentary. And so a whole bunch of people are over at a friend's house, and and one of the people there, her name is Stephanie, and she was one of my. We even went to kindergarten together, so we've known each other a long time. This, like, bubbly, fun personality. She was dating another friend of mine, Ryan. Just, I don't know, very very pleasant person. And then Bernadette, who was the mom, comes down as we're talking and basically says, "You get out of the house. I do not want you in here." And this woman, Bernadette, I always compared her to Tigger in Winnie the Pooh, because she had that level of energy and bubbly personality, a very fun person. So to hear, and actually I was not there for that part where she told Stephanie to leave her house. But it was just completely out of character. I found out about that a little bit later, because Stephanie, before leaving the house, but after that happened, she said, "Scott, I'm having weird stuff go on." At this point, I'm not the ghost guru I am now, but it was known that I'd done this documentary, so I knew a little bit. And she said, there's been paranormal activity ever since I went off to college. She went to Indiana University, so this could be interesting if there's any Hoosiers listening that know of a haunted dorm. But there was activity at the dorm, which I will absolutely get into what it is. And then I came home, and it's happening here as well. And I said, I'm not the person to talk to. This is fascinating. But even though she just yelled at you and told you to get out of her house, Bernadette's the one that you have to talk to about this. And so we went up there, and I think she was afraid to, and I can't remember if I initiated the conversation or if she did. But I said, "Listen, Stephanie's having some issues. It seems to be something attached to her." And she just thought, "Oh my God, how did I not see this?" I picked up on the attachment, this negative thing that's around her. And that's what I felt. And that's why I, for no good reason, yelled at her and told her to get out of the house. I was yelling at Stephanie. I should have been yelling at whatever is attached to her. And so what turns out, she moved into this dorm. And, if you've seen me give speeches, or maybe even seen some live event things that I do, live streams, I should say, I love talking about apports, where a physical object will disappear and then reappear somewhere else. And sometimes they're really extreme. They're always attention grabbing, and they're always, it's one of the things that I love so much, because oftentimes you see a shadowy figure and you think, well, did I see that? You can kind of rationalize it away. But if a physical object is disappearing from one place and reappearing somewhere else, and it's always something, it's a necessity object or a very sentimental object. Therefore, it's something that I didn't move that. I would know if I moved that. I never keep that item somewhere else. That's what was happening with Stephanie in her dorm room. Her keys would go missing. And again, keys are a big one because they're a necessity item. You really notice if your keys go missing, you notice it right away. And so therefore, I believe it's kind of an attention grabbing technique for a conscious entity on the other side that's trying to get your attention. And so she would, she put up a key hook and would tell her roommate, "Listen, look, I'm putting my keys right here. I got class in about a half hour. You're seeing I'm putting them here, right? So if I forget where I put them, you're going to tell me." And of course, the roommate's, "What do you take it easy, Steph?" But then sure enough, half hour later, she'd get up to go to class and her keys would not be on that hook. And she would tear the dorm apart to find them. And eventually, and on one occurrence at least, she found them in her bottom drawer of clothes. And it was in the middle of a bunch of folded, put away jeans. So nothing had been disturbed, but somehow the keys had disappeared from that hook and then buried itself in her clothes. So you cut to, she comes home. She comes back from Indiana University, and she does some grocery shopping for her mom. And one of the things that happened is that, that light mesh material that a bag of oranges, that is the bag of oranges. So you rip it open, as she did, and she was taking the oranges out, putting them in the fridge. And as she turned back around, as she emptied it, the empty now nylon bag of oranges, not nylon bag, has disappeared. Like, what? Where in the hell is that? And then it fell from the ceiling. Again, attention grabbing. spectacular. I love these stories because they're not happening to me. And so Bernadette said, I know Reiki, which is something that I didn't know. I don't think I'd even heard that word at this point. And so I can try to do whatever you do to do a cleansing. And I was a fly on the wall here. I was observing what was going on. And Bernadette said the animals in this house are going to go kind of crazy for a while. They're going to act strangely. Now, in this house, they had a number of cats. One of them is so skittish. Just if other people are around, you don't see it. And one of the Ryan, who would come to this house all the time for years, didn't even know this other cat existed because it was so skittish. But sure enough, we have Bernadette has Stephanie laying down, and she's kind of going over her body with a crystal hanging. I don't know if it was using it like a pendulum or not. I really don't know the ins and outs of the process that was going on here. But this skittish cat comes out and then apparently sees something that we can't see. And this was in a living room with a huge vaulted ceiling, so very tall ceiling. And this cat saw something in the sky and then walked over to the corner of the room and then just sat in the corner staring up for over an hour, just motionless, completely motionless. And then by the time the cleansing had finished, this cat, you would think, would revert back to like, oh shit, there's people here. I'm going to get out of here. And I apologize for swearing. But no, the cat was suddenly completely affectionate, was rubbing up on people, was jumping on people's laps. Again, super, super, super unlike anything that we'd ever seen out of this animal. For those of us who had even seen this animal. And I know Jeff, the son, would tell stories of not seances, but things like this, ceremonies like this going on, and the cats chasing invisible things all over the place. Now, cats are weird. Cats do weird things. But when they're constantly doing it just when these kind of like crystal ceremony things are going on, I don't know, we start to see a trend and you think, well, maybe there is something going on here, something to it. And I frankly don't know the answer to it. So through the ceremony, Bernadette was able to decipher that there was the spirit of a male farmer who had taken a bit of a liking to Stephanie, and it was his, I believe it was his property where the university is now built. And so he's probably haunting all over that place. But then for whatever reason, really liked Stephanie, who herself was like I said, a shining light, a bright, high energy person. And here's where it gets more dark. Stephanie began to hate her boyfriend, Ryan. And she would just be completely cold to him for no reason whatsoever. And she said she even remembers one time he came over to the house to try to cheer her up, see how she's doing. And she just was very cold, standoffish. Eventually he's like, well, okay, I'm going to give you your space. I'm going to leave. And she remembered looking out the window and just thinking, thank God he's finally gone. And she had no reason to feel that way, but she detested him. And we really think it was an emotion, and even more than an emotion, a thought, a feeling, an attitude impressed on Stephanie by this other entity. And when that cleansing happened, a weight was absolutely lifted. And I don't know, it was actually powerful to be there to see, even though nothing happened to me, but just to see how these two people were dealing with it. It was very emotional for both of them. And one of them was a jock, a football jock, a tough guy. But he was really, it hit home. It hit him hard just to witness all of this happening. We're not done yet. The next weirdest thing ever is still yet to happen. Because at this point, the ceremony's over. A couple of us that were present for it are having a conversation just about ghost stories, about stuff, about the unknown. And like I said, this was shortly before Christmas. So this was, late December of 1999. And somebody came up with the idea that, hey, you guys should go check out the Gate in Libertyville. Now, the Gate is this infamously haunted location. I can't believe I don't have a copy of my book down here because the cover of my book is a picture of the Gate in Libertyville. And at this point in time, I didn't know it was as darkly haunted as it is, because this next idea sounds so horrible now. But we just knew it was a haunted location. Somebody said, hey, Stephanie, now that we know that you're open to this kind of stuff, you should go and check it out. And Stephanie did not want to do that. Don't blame her. She had just been through hell. But Bernadette was like, become familiar with this, become comfortable with it, and then you can understand it and deal with it. And so then we got off topic and we were talking about this, that, and the other for a long time. And again, with the plan still that we were going to go visit the gate, which I'd never even been to. So this was going to be my first ever visit to the gate. And at one point there becomes this natural lull in the conversation, and I'm sitting back in my chair, and Ryan, again, the boyfriend, is kind of sitting at this angle off from me, but between us is the Christmas tree, so we can't see each other. So as we're sitting in this quiet moment, I hear Ryan say, "Hey, Scott, are we going to get going or what?" And you know how sometimes you kind of like snap out of a trance, even though you heard somebody, you'll just kind of instinctively say, "Wait, what?" And then he just looked at me like I had three heads. So I looked over at Bernadette to like, "Hey, help me out. You heard him say something." And she looked at me equally puzzled. Like, "Okay, Ryan, did you just tell me or say to me, ask me, aren't we about to get going, or are we going to get going or something like that?" He's like, "No, but I was just about to suggest that." And that was mind blowing to me because I, clear as day, heard this guy speak to me. And it was his speech pattern. It was his voice. Now, after that moment happened, I'm like, okay, well, maybe psychics are onto something. That's never happened since. That was 1999. I've been doing this ever since then. So that is not a common thing, but apparently it's possible to read someone's mind, actually be on that same wavelength. So that was an awesome, groundbreaking moment to me that just kind of showed me that, yeah, indeed, there is a lot more going on out there that I'm not at all aware of. So just a little bit more on the topic of attachments. I think it is always a great idea when you're doing a paranormal investigation to, at the very end of it, wrap it up. When you wrap it up to, you know, I don't go through any big ceremony type thing. I don't always do the sage smudge thing. A lot of times people will have that and they'll cleanse you with the sage. Okay, that's fine. I'm not opposed to that at all. But I just verbally say, because I believe that most of the time, if you're talking to any paranormal entity out there, you're just talking to another person, another human being. And you just say, "Hey, thank you for letting us invade your space. I hope we weren't a bother. And I'm going to go home now. And when I leave, I do not invite you to come along. Please stay here." And I think most of the time, if you think of it on that level, that it's just you're talking to another person, then that other person would respect your wishes. And on top of that, I think most of paranormal activity is a residual effect. It's a locked in time moment that does not have a consciousness. It's part of science that we don't understand. It's part of nature that we don't really understand how it works yet, but it's nothing that you actually have to worry about at any degree. I will say that as I was doing my initial documentary back in 1999, activity at the house I was living in picked up a lot. I have no idea if that had to do, because at that point, I don't think I was saying, "Don't come home with me." I don't know if I picked something up from the road that came home. I did want to tell this other shorter story. It could be long, but I'll make it short. Mary Sherwinski was my research partner. And so we're talking about the summer of 2000 at this point. And we would once a week usually head out, and we would visit maybe a dozen locations, and we'd sunrise to past sunset, just do these marathon days of visiting haunted locations. Again, we weren't ghost hunting yet. That still wasn't a thing, but we were just visiting these places and trying to interview store owners, anybody that witnessed something. Just we were approaching everything like journalists and visiting the places ourselves, because I never wanted to write about a place that I hadn't been to myself. I think that's somewhat disingenuous, but also you just gain so much more as a writer if you had the ability to say, "I stood here and this is what it looked like. This is what I saw." And then every once in a while you could say, "And then this happened to me." And that just really makes the text come alive. One of these days, and we were exhausted. Every time we were exhausted by the end of it, because there's such long days, lots of travel, lots of heat, especially in the middle of Chicago summer, which is very humid if you're not aware. And I remember this was early July of that year, that we'd kind of done our checklist, and I was driving Mary back to her house on the north side of the city, and you could tell that we both wanted to go home, but she realized that we were actually kind of close to Robinson Woods Native American burial ground, which in time has become one of my favorite places in the planet. I've ended up working in that location so much in a non-paranormal sense, but this was my first ever visit there, and Mary, you could tell, she's like, "Kind of want to go home, but we are right here. So what do you think?" I'm going to gloss over a whole bunch, but one of the things that happened repeatedly was we had these bizarre sounds that would appear. They would kind of, you could almost pinpoint exactly where they were coming from. They were always coming from over our heads. Sometimes they'd be moving around, and it's such a difficult thing to explain. Because imagine, I'm going to just layer it in. Imagine like the sound of television static, just that hissy, staticky sound. Now imagine it's kind of fluctuating. So it's kind of coming and going. It's kind of warping around. And every once in a while, there's kind of like these sharp whip type sounds that'll punctuate throughout it. And again, sometimes these things are moving, the sound. And every time we heard it, it just made my hair stand up on end. And one of the most extreme moments, now, if you've never been there, this is right by O'Hare Airport. It's by a 4-lane street, River Road, and Lawrence. And so there's air traffic and regular traffic in close proximity. So there's a lot of sound in this area. So the deer are totally desensitized to sound. And they'll actually come, they're pretty desensitized to people. They'll come really close to you. The time we heard this sound the longest, all the deer hightailed it. They ran for the hills. And then all of the dogs across the street started barking their heads off in their yards. That just, oh my gosh, the chills, like something negative just happened. So other things happened on this day, but eventually, Mary, we called it a night. We went home, and again, there's other stuff that happened this day. But Mary was then woken up in the night in her bedroom by that sound in her room. That understandably frightened her like crazy. Now, again, we weren't planning on going there. We just happened to stop by because we found ourselves in that neighborhood. So Mary realized that we did not make any offering. And there were offerings. It's usually pennies or tobacco or sometimes other things, but leave an offering because you're visiting someone else's site, even someone that's passed on. And indeed, there are a number of burials at that location, including a wonderful, a great man, Chief Alexander Robinson, who is one of the most important pioneers in the history of Chicago. And we did not pay any respects. We didn't do anything disrespectful. We didn't vandalize anything or spend the night drinking there or anything like that, but we didn't pay our respects. So Mary then, the next day, she went there and she made an offering. And at that point, I got a chime so loud in my head to scare the crap out of me just now. Okay, thank you. Pam asked if we recorded the sounds we heard. There is, I think, only one time where the camera was actually rolling. And yes, we got just a sliver of it. We didn't get that super long one, unfortunately, but we do have a little bit of it. And I think it might be, this is a deep dive that few people would have, but when my book first came out, it came out with a CD-ROM, and I think that file is on there. I should dig it up. All of the original content is on VHS, so I've got to digitize. But yeah, I should go back and relocate that and maybe tell the story with some more visuals. But anyway, so back to the question or point about attachments. Mary thought that something did come home with her that day, and she maybe did something disrespectful and therefore had an attachment. So she went back, made an offering to make peace, and it apparently worked. Now, fortunately, nothing like that ever happened with me. And that location in time became the most active place I've ever been, where I could go and I could go there, and 3 out of 4 times I'd have an experience, which those numbers are over the moon. That's crazy. And at this point, I've been there. I probably had nothing happen in the last 100 times I've been there. And I think part of that is because I've done some work that actually works with the family that's represented there. And the piece is definitely already made. But anyway, so I've talked longer than I want to. I tried to keep this to a half hour, and I'm a little bit past that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please leave comments. Those who are watching right now, go ahead, leave comments. I'm sure I'll be able to find them after I go offline. But I would love to do this at least once a week, maybe a couple times a week. Maybe I'll go back to YouTube. I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'll do one a week on Facebook, one on YouTube, but whatever. If anybody has any questions about locations, about phenomena, about anything at all, I am here, and I would love to fill the void that fill our dance cards now that they are completely open right now. I hope I'm entertaining. I hope I'm enlightening to some degree as well. Again, thanks for watching. whatsyourghoststory.com is the website, and the Fantastic Story Society is the podcast. Thanks again.